Joel, state your name. Thanks for coming. Tell your president, Kevin, hi. Thank you for making the trip.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Chair Betancourt and members of the committee. I am Joel Griffith. I'm a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. I want to make it clear the views I express today are my own. Local governments should not be spending funds that are distributed through the American Rescue Plan Act on the establishment of universal basic income programs. First, the lawfulness of the establishment of these pilot programs with these COVID funds is legally dubious. In fact, ARPA clearly specifies 4 categories of permissible uses of those funds. The only category that under which universal basic income could possibly fall is Section 602A, which reads in part, to respond to COVID-19 or its negative economic impacts. As you are all well aware, Texas is no longer experiencing negative COVID economic impacts. In fact, Texas was one of the first states to fully recover from the pandemic shutdowns, thanks in large part to the leadership of your governor and members of the legislature. By October 2021, Texas had recovered all of the jobs lost during COVID. And here in Austin in particular, the total number of people employed today is up nearly 20% relative to the beginning of the pandemic. The poverty rate also shows this. The poverty rate in the most recent year we have, which is 2022, was near a 25-year low of 14%. But legalities of using ARPA funds aside, recent experiments with universal basic income provide ample warning against further proliferation of these programs. I'll go into detail a bit on the study that was referenced just a few minutes ago. In that study, in which several thousand individuals received $1,000 payments, monthly payments, we have 8 key takeaways. Number 1, UBI recipients and other adults in their households ended up working 2.2 fewer hours a week relative to those who are not receiving UBI. Over the course of that 3-year study, this amounted to a $2,500 reduction in annual household income wages for those on UBI. Number 2, contrary to conventional wisdom, recipients of UBI end up using their bonus time on leisure activities rather than on productive pursuits such as more education, seeking a better job, or even caring for family. And of interesting note from these studies, UBI recipients without children cut back their work hours even more than those recipients with children. Number 3, UBI did not translate into the recipients obtaining higher quality work. In fact, they ended up applying for a narrower range of jobs. Unemployment became more pervasive with those UBI recipients. Number 4, oddly enough, after securing UBI, recipients reported significantly more work-limiting health problems and disabilities than the control group. And then quickly, at number 5, the studies show that, quote, essentially no evidence of improvements in physical health due to the transfers. In fact, by the second year of the study, any initial reported gains in mental health had completely vanished. The same holds true in regards to food security for the recipients. By the end of the study, recipients of UBI reported no better ability to meet their food needs than those in the control group. And lastly, when it comes to the financial health of UBI recipients, because the recipients ended up increasing spending elsewhere, the typical recipient ended up experiencing a $3,000 decline in net worth by the end of the period study. So based simply on the harms of UBI to recipients' long-term well-being and the lack of the desired results, state legislators would be well justified in considering prohibitions on the establishment of local universal basic income. Yes, a preemption of those local programs. Third, the cost to the public due to higher taxes and cuts to essential government services from UBI would be disastrous. Considering a scaled-back UBI program providing just $500 per month for every household earning less than the median income here in Austin. I ran those numbers. There are 423,000 households in Austin. The cost of that scaled-back program would be $2.5 billion annually in this city alone. That would consume half of the Austin City annual budget. On a national scale, it's even more disastrous. Providing UBI to all working age individuals with income underneath a certain threshold would cost $1 trillion plus per year. That would be half of all the annual individual income tax revenues collected nationally. In closing, localities should not squander the remaining temporary ARPA funds on a program that is demonstrably harmful to both taxpayers and recipients. If localities choose to accept these federal funds, they should be used for purposes that are of permanent benefit to the entire community, such as improvements to water, sewage, and other infrastructure permitted by law. State legislators should consider permanently prohibiting Austin and other municipalities from ever implementing universal basic income. Thank you.
Joel, thank you for coming, and I really appreciate the scale-up version of what a UBI would cost if it was implemented effectively globally, for lack of a better description, or certainly universally, if you pardon the pun, because that's one of the big concerns I've got is the fact there's simply not enough budget capability for these type of programs if they were indeed universal, much less on these guaranteed pilot programs. You made a really interesting point about that study. There was a $3,000 net reduction in net worth at the end of that study. Wow, that is a huge amount of for people in that classification, because most of the folks in that group, a control group, I would assume, don't even have $1,000 in their bank account. And it looks like, again, all those indicators are down with the exception of leisure time.
Yeah, and on that leisure time component, the study made careful note that we're not talking about leisure time as in spending time caring for elderly parents or children. We're talking about leisure time in terms of non-productive use of that time. And that was the only possible benefit that this study uncovered.
Right, well, because obviously the question is, this program was, brought to attention because we had a county doing it versus cities that were already involved in this with using effectively home rule, but that study has some really whopping negatively documented public policy outcomes here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Who wants to go first?
Mr. Griffiths, please, the senior senator.
No, I think he's passing. Who?
No, okay.
Oh, you're on? Okay, go. Sorry.
I note that on page, I think it's 4 of the presentation. If I can ever get to it. You make, in number 4, you make note of a further note of caution is warranted. Talk
Yes, sir.
about that.
Yes, so in my written testimony, I wanted to elaborate on other dangers of using federal dollars for local programs. So I talked about the affirmatively furthering fair housing program, which a lot of dollars coming from housing and urban development require communities to advance a new rule that came down from the Biden administration. And that program says that if you're a local community receiving HUD grants, for instance, to further fair housing, you have to comply in certain parameters that HUD has laid out. And a lot of those parameters tell local governments that if they do not change certain parts of their zoning code, for instance, that they will not be able to receive these dollars. So these dollars are often being used as a tool by DC bureaucrats to force local governments to change how their communities are constructed in order to meet the demands of those bureaucrats. And so I wanted, since the general topic was talking about the federal dollars, direct federal dollars, I thought it'd be appropriate to lay out some other instances beyond UBI in which local community leaders should be aware.
What I take from that, you don't think that the federal government should be telling local governments what to do?
Well, in the instance of housing in general, that's a correct presumption. And anytime you have these government resources with strings attached, especially coming from DC, that can be problematic.
So if we have strings attached from the state going to local governments, that's okay?
Well, I think it's the former witness reference. We know that our national government is a creation of the states. Local governments are a creation of the state governments. And as you're well aware, in Texas, the state government has a lot of constitutional power to make sure that cities are managed properly. I stayed in all.
And so does the federal government has some constitutional power, especially as it relates to distribution of funds. Let me move on. Is a part of this, anything in there part of the 2025 proposal? Anything in which you have testified to a part of the 2025 proposal?
I mean, universal basic income is definitely not a policy that is recommended in Project 2025. I can assure you of that.
So is there anything in your testimony a part of the 2025 policy?
I would have to actually read the entire piece on housing to make you aware of that, but I can assure you that universal basic income is not a proposal that would be recommended by Project 25 or the Heritage Foundation.
Or recommended against?
It's just not. You're saying
it's not a part of it?
No, certainly not a part of it.
Okay, I'll take it.
No, those proposals are furthering of more responsibility in general, not of advocating in any way for a program like universal.
No, I'm not saying advocating for, but advocating against. There's nothing in the 2025 proposals that would advocate against these types of programs.
I'm honestly not sure, but
Fair enough.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's okay, Joel. He was hoping for another answer, but
I got the answer. I was hoping.
that's right.
So, Mr. Griffiths, to be clear, it is your view that unitary executive authority by the state over local governments is okay and even to be sought after, but unitary executive authority by federal government over local governments is not.
in all these instances, the Constitution must be followed. We have one, of course, for the nation and also for the state. And look, if you walk through Austin, which I did both last night and today, you can see numerous instances in which it would be actually recommended for the state legislators to get involved with more local government in Austin because of the state of dereliction on the city streets.
My question to you, and I will restate it because you did not answer it, is it your philosophical position that unitary executive authority by the state over local governments is to be pursued, whereas unitary executive authority by the federal government over local governments should not be allowed?
I can say this, when it comes to our national Congress, Congress should, in all matters, be following the constitutional guidelines that dictate to them what they have the power to involve in.
Please answer my question.
Sarah, I'm not even sure what your question is myself.
I will state it a third time.
Okay.
Is it your belief that unitary executive authority exercised by the state over local governments is preferred and to be pursued, whereas unitary executive authority by the federal government over local governments is to be prohibited? This is the third time I've asked the same question.
I appreciate the question. I'll try to give you an answer once again. Congress, I think as we all know, is bound by the Constitution to only act in a manner in which the Constitution actually gives them the power to act. They're quite restrained. All the powers that are not mentioned in the Constitution, right? They're left to the states and the people, which brings us to Texas or any other state. The powers that state legislators have vary by state. In Texas, there's a wide latitude under the Texas Constitution for state legislators to ensure that local governments are being run appropriately. And if you have a situation like right now in Austin with the rampant drug use and vagrancy, those are opportunities for state legislators to actually ensure that those local governments are being managed more appropriately.
So your answer is yes, the federal government should not have unitary executive authority over local governments, but the state government, specifically the state of Texas, should.
States have immense power to ensure that the municipalities, the counties, and the cities are being run appropriately.
And is it true that Project 2025 seeks to reduce or eliminate Head Start, reduce or eliminate Medicaid,
Okay,
and reduce or eliminate
as much as Senator
Medicare.
Eckhart, as I'd love to go into that.
No, this goes directly to unitary executive authority of the federal government over local governments.
I encourage you to read. It's available online. It's a
I
lengthy
have.
document.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Okay,
So you do think it's appropriate for federal executive unitary authority to reduce these programs at the local level?
When we're talking right here about universal basic income, it is very clear that there are negative consequences both to the recipients and to the taxpayers. Because of that, it is perfectly appropriate for state legislators to step in and ensure that this type of a dangerous program would not be implemented.
So you want unitary executive authority by the federal government over local governments on policies that you like, but not over policies that you don't like?
Thank you again for that question. In this instance, we're talking. I'm talking specifically about the ability of state governments to ensure that local municipalities, counties, and cities are operating in a manner that is not economically destructive.
okay, right, okay, so let's, why don't we move on from that one? Because I don't have enough time to cover 2025 or Agenda 47 or anything else today, much as we would love to have that discussion.
Let's do 2025.
No, 2025, right, okay, I agree. All right, because I've got Senator West for a few more minutes. I want him to get to Sammy and Brian and James's conversation. Other questions for Joel? I want to thank you for coming down. This is a very important national view of this, so I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, Senator.
And Senator Eckhart will be available after class for further debate on these.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
This is not the national view, it's a perspective.
Oh, okay. It's a perspective of the national view offered by a very well, should I say, prepared witness for the day.
I'll take your word for it.
Thank you. Then I agree with you. Anyway, Joel, safe travels. Glad you could be down here.
Thank you.
Okay.